Still boil it. I'll just take it off, worrying about the wrong things. Some of them guys think that way, though. People still look, if you're worrying about the wrong man things. Because we're letting food go. Oh, good for you. He hasn't had some nice moments that was like. I don't care. Yeah.
Poor kids. I don't trick or treat him. This ghost came to my house first and I gave this ghost to all.
Oh, now I.
That is funny.
Keep light on.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry. Good to go. He's coming to station.
Yeah.
Now they come.
Please rise. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please call the roll.
Councilman Kitchen.
Here.
Councilman Morrow.
Here.
Councilman Secreto.
Here.
Councilman Van Cleef.
Here.
Supervisor Quigley.
Here. Thank you very much and welcome to the Town of Ulster Town Board meeting. The workshop meeting for November being held on Thursday, November 4th. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda from the board? Are there any public comments on the agenda from members of the public? Thank you very much. Ms. Reevy, communications, please.
Yes. The first communication received November 1st from the Ulster County Economic Development Alliance. The town of Ulster expressed 2 times its interest in 57 acres of Ulster County property on Boyce's Lane Extension. The letter received rejects the town's second request and states that the committee or the board, Ulster County Economic Development, their decision to begin contract negotiations with Natural Resources. Second communication received by the Town of Ulster Supervisor on September 20th. The Office of State Comptroller provided the Town of Ulster with its scores using fiscal stress monitoring system to examine financial information provided by the town. The analysis provides an assessment of fiscal challenges facing town government. The Town of Ulster fiscal stress score for year ending 2020 is 0, meaning no designation of fiscal stress. This is consistent with 2019 and 18, wherein the town score has also been 0. Third communication received from the New York State Department of Transportation on October 29th. New York State DOT has begun the design phase on a project to install traffic signal generator switches at various intersections in Ulster County, 9 of which are the Town of Ulster. The anticipated construction of this project is in the summer of 2022. Last communication is received from our Deputy Assessor, Miranda Bernholz, from also the New York State Board of, Assessors Association, received October 27th, just last week. In 2017, former town assessor Jim Maloney brought the issue of the dark store theory before our town board and before the New York State Assessors Association. The dark store theory unfairly reduces assessments on commercial properties. Jim passed away on July 11th, 2019, and the Assessors Association continued to pursue the issue. Over the past 3 years, the town board passed several resolutions calling on the governor and state legislature to enact and support legislation to eliminate the dark store theory. And just recently on October 25th, New York State Governor Hochul signed the dark store bill into law, allowing big businesses to pay their fair share of property taxes. That completes tonight's communication.
Thank you very much. Moving on to new business. Is Mr. Alberts here? Okay, the first item on our agenda, the presenters are not here, so I'm going to move on. Gentlemen, in your package for presentation for consideration at next meeting is a copy of a resolution adopting the town budget for 2022. This is the form of the resolution that will be considered at the next meeting. There's no action required by the town board tonight on this matter. The next item on our agenda is a motion to authorize the supervisor to make payment to Statewide Aquastore in the amount of $4,750 for contract TU 211, the replacement of the potable water storage tank in Housing Park Water District. May I have a motion? Authorizing.
Second.
Any discussion on the matter? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Personnel on the next matter.
This hire comes at the request of our Chief Ferrari, the court security officer. And his name is Anthony LaRocca. Title will be court officer, Department Court, comes out of the general fund. It will be part-time, non-competitive, no union position, no health insurance. The wage will be $21 an hour. Start date is 11/05/2021, which is tomorrow. This request comes in from Chief Ferrari. Right now, Anthony LaRocca is a part-time is currently employed as a part-time officer at Ellenville Police Department. With that, I'd like a motion to hire Mr. LaRocca
So moved.
for security in the court.
Do we have a second?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion on the matter? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Gentlemen, the next item in our agenda is a discussion in reference to the Kingston Ulster Airport. Over the last several months, we have heard public comment on the unacceptable noise levels relating to the use of helicopters. I had the opportunity to analyze some publicly available use data and some non-publicly available use data from the airport and the heavy helicopters, which are using the primary landing strip, which is an FAA funded facility, are related to operations by the New York State Police and by the Air National Guard and the United States Army. I've had the opportunity to speak to Senator Hinchy's office and to Senator Schumer's office about having their offices render assistance to the town of Ulster by interceding with the New York State Police and the Army and the Army Air National Guard to cut down on their use of the Ulster Airport so that we could reduce the amount of heavy helicopter traffic and consequently the noise. In the package tonight is a form of a letter. It's addressed to Senator Hinchy. It describes the circumstances down there at the Kingston Ulster Airport and requests her assistance to approach the New York State Police Aviation Unit and request the modification of the training flight schedules that are utilizing the Kingston Ulster Airport. A similar letter will be sent to Senator Schumer's office requesting that the U.S. Army and the Air National Guard undertake the same actions to reduce their flights. So I put that letter on the floor for discussion amongst the board's members.
I think it's a great idea, and I make a motion that we send those letters.
I agree with John. I'm at the second.
Okay, John, have you had any conversations with the airport management, and how have you found the airport management to be when you've had your conversations with them?
I have found the airport people, personnel, their attorneys, and locally the management to be extremely cooperative and willing to do anything to work with the neighborhood and the community and solve this problem. And I think that we can solve this problem, and I think this is a giant step forward in assisting to make that happen.
Mr. Secreto, can you describe the conversations you've had with Ms. Kim?
Right now, we're in conversation with
Microphone.
him about having a playground put out there on Dunwoody Drive, possibly. are really the only area that put it right now. But they want to be very receptive to the community out there. They want to help them out. They want to do little functions at the airport. I think John talked to them about holding some gatherings for the kids and parents, showing them the helicopters, the planes out there. But the playground is something that we've been working on for about 3 months now. And no money out of the town's pocket. We're going to pay for everything. We just need that little piece of land at the end of the road. I'm working with John Quick from the deli. I'm talking with him. It's his property, and we're working back and forth, see if he would like to donate to the land or lease it to us for $1 a year or something. So, it's in negotiations right now.
Furthermore, Mr. Jeffrey Ring, the chairman of our planning board, who's also a pilot with Mr. Morrow, has had several conversations and asked the airport operators to visit with Valerie Harris, who came to the podium at the last meeting. And as it's been explained to me that they did. I have not had the opportunity to call Ms. Harris to get her feedback on the conversations. I have asked Chief Berardi to send a detective down to Ms. Harris because she did make some allegations of harassment. We're going to follow up on those. And I understand that they have attempted to contact Mr. Stuart Dean to have a conversation, but that has not been successful. So we are answering the community's requests and taking action. So I have a motion and a second. Mr. Van Cleef, do you have anything to say on this matter?
I guess I do. It's difficult because the airport is has received federal funds, and the airport is regulated not by us. So our only leverage is to lobby and to try to persuade people to assist, to do the right thing. So I think we got to continue to do this. And I think we've made some great effort that way. So I think this is a good step. And, we got to follow up. I think with these things, I don't want this just to be the one state thing when we walk away.
Okay.
So if we can maybe make a point to follow up.
Maybe this is just a start.
Right.
I agree with Cleve.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second. That concludes discussion on sending the letters. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Within the last 2 meetings, the town board took action to authorize the drafting of a grant application for the WIA infrastructure program with the Environmental Facilities Corporation. The deadline is November 22nd to make the application. It is for the replacement of the small water tank in the Ulster Water District on the south end. As a part of the application, the town board is required to provide evidence of financial ability to pay for the town's share of the cost of the project, and to also provide a designation of a seeker action. So tonight, we're presenting a resolution for the appropriation of the sum of a blank because the budget has not been finished. And in that resolution is a declaration of a type 2 seeker action, as the replacement of the water tank is in the exact same location with the exact same footprint of the existing tank. So there is no action on this matter to be taken tonight. The resolution is on the town's website for review. Continuing on,
Do you have any ballpark idea what that's going to cost?
700 to 800,000.
This is the one that's got all the
Boiler plugs in. If the tank is a vintage 1957 tank,
vintage means.
50.
oh, yes.
I resemble that.
And anyway, the tank does need to be replaced. The town was laboring under the assumption that the 4.8 million gallon tank up there would also have to be replaced immediately, and that we needed a source of water supply in the south end. So at that point, keeping the small tank as it was in service was critical. But now that we've had the interior of the large tank inspected, and it's been determined that it's got a 10-year future life, it is prudent that we replace the small tank now and be prepared for that point in time when we do have to replace the large tank. The next item is a presentation of a resolution authorizing the adoption by the town board of the town of Ulster of a local law blank of 2021, a local law known and cited as the opt-out of allowing on-site cannabis consumption sites in the town of Ulster. This is for presentation to the town board and for consideration at the next meeting. We are required under the state's laws to make a declaration or not, depending upon how we feel about A, the retail distribution of marijuana, and B, allowing on-site consumption in lounges within the town's boundaries. So for consideration is a resolution outlawing on-site cannabis consumption. Inversely, with the next resolution, which is a presentation of a resolution adopting local law number blank of 2021 of the town of Ulster, amending the zoning code, allowing adult use cannabis retail dispensaries in accordance with the New York State Marijuana Regulations and Taxation Act 131. This is a modification of the town zoning code to permit the retail distribution of regulated marijuana in the RC, which is regional commercial, and HC, which is highway commercial zoning districts within the town. That would mean Ulster Avenue from the city of Kingston line to the Saugerties line, and Route 28 from the thruway to the town of Kingston line. Those are the two regions within the town where it would be permitted for retail distribution of marijuana. As I said, no action is going to be needed to be taken. This matter is being presented for public consideration and will be voted on at the next meeting. And the next item under new business is a presentation of a resolution modifying the 2021 Town of Ulster fee schedule to establish a sewer use rate for the Spring Lake Sewer District. The sewer improvements were completed in the spring. The final pumps have been installed with those residents that had desired them. The system is in operation, and it is required that in order to bill those users for their sewer use, we need a rate. And that rate is normally established in the first meeting or second meeting of the year in the town's fee schedule. And we will be presenting a modification to the 2021 fee schedule, creating a billing rate for the Spring Lake Sewer District at the next meeting. As Mr. Albert showed up.
No, Mr. Al.
Moving on to old business. Mr. Kovacs. At the last meeting, we were presented with a written request from Ms. Hartman on 3 matters. The last matter on the list related to the matter of Spencer Wilson and the signs that are located on his premises on Harwood Street. You prepared a memo outlining the town's legal rights and responsibilities in reference to this matter. Could you please explain it to us? You need a copy of the memo? That'd be great.
This memo is part of the public record.
It is on the website right now.
Thank you, Supervisor. You asked me to look into the issue of what actions, what can the town do to regulate some political signs at 188 Rentham Street. As I understand it, these signs are vulgar. They contain some obscenities. My understanding is that they are political in nature. They are directed at public officials. In summary, I prepared a memo for you, but these are political yard signs. They may be vulgar, but essentially courts have ruled that these are considered political speech. And political speech is given the highest protection under the First Amendment. There's been many cases across the country in the last couple of years regarding signs of this nature directed at the current president and the former president. And various organizations have gotten involved. ACLU has gotten involved on behalf of property owners. And nearly all the courts that have weighed on this issue have found in favor of the property owner, indicating that while these signs, while crude, vulgar perhaps, fall under the protection of the First Amendment. So that is my conclusion. I think there's very limited options we can do right now as a town to regulate these signs. The only caveat I would say is that if these signs cross over into sort of lewd signs, that potentially could be regulated by the town. So that is my conclusion. Happy to answer any questions.
I believe your memo cited a 1971 Supreme Court decision that related to the use of a word that is frequently objected to from Mr. Wilson's signs.
Yes, exactly.
Would you explain to the board what the Supreme Court of the United States said in that case?
The case is Cohen versus California. It's sort of semi-famous Supreme Court case. And what the court decided in that case is profanity is protected speech, as long as it is not removed. So basically, obscene speech, profane speech, while it may be distasteful to the community, it still has free speech protection.
Any questions from the board?
Thank you.
Okay, what I just want to say, fellow board members would agree with me. Town board does not condone the actions of Mr. Wilson. We do not support his position. But I think in conclusion, we respect his rights as an American citizen under the Constitution of the United States. And as indicated by Mr. Kovacs, we are limited in our abilities to address the concerns that have been raised by the neighbors to us. What I would ask is that we have had, Mr. Kovacs, hold on a second, we've had conversations and we operate under the assumption that political signs cannot go out in an election year prior to October 1st. I don't know where that assumption came from, but it's something that we've always operated under. I was just wondering, is from a building point of view, we have regulatory rules relating to the size of the signs. Is there anything that we might approach without restricting the content of the signs to the size of the signs and their locations?
That is a good question. The town can regulate signs regarding to where they can be placed in the property, the size of the signs. Those are proper regulations. We have, of course, a zoning code where we do regulate commercial signs. Commercial signs are given less of the protection of the First Amendment, so we can do that. With political signs, yes, we can possibly regulate them. It's a different standard. I would have to look into that a little bit more, Supervisor, but
Is it possible, I know we have in our zoning code setbacks from the property line relating to construction of fences, construction of outbuildings, accessory structures, swimming pools, et cetera, et cetera. Is there some way we could look at possibly crafting a zoning regulation restricting outside of election season for lawn signs, the placement of political signs directly on the property line or within 2 feet of the, whatever? Is there some research you can do and come back to us?
I can certainly do that. I think we have to be careful that we don't try to regulate political signs under different
I'm not-
offices so that our sign code will be upheld by a court
Correct,
challenge.
correct.
I will certainly look into that and get back to the town board.
And I would like the audience to understand and the public that is out there in the internet world. Mr. Wilson already has a case against the town of Ulster in federal court for violation of his civil rights relating from a police incident at his residence 2 years ago now. Thank you.
I think the One other thing we should look at, there's 2 bus stops right in that area too. Discussions with 3 families all together. They're kind of annoyed that they have to bring their child out there and have them look at the front of the porch. Kids aren't dumb, you know, they can.
I think I think I agree with the board, but you're letting one person dictate what can go on in the whole town. Now, I mean, not every sign's gonna be rude and political, but yet you're gonna create a law that's gonna prohibit, you know, maybe someone wants to put up sign that's something positive. And when you talk about political signs, I'm a zoning officer myself, political signs are based on, you're putting your sign in somebody's yard, you're running for office. This is, I think, more than that. I don't know if that would categorize that in the zoning world as a political sign or making a public statement.
Political signs, you know, there's always the 30 days
Political
before
sign
the
says
election, you know.
Rocco's running, come out and vote, you know, vote Rocco's or vote Clayton or vote.
Whereas the RRA said, no Rocco.
No, Rocco.
It's my dilemma.
I'm gonna ask the town attorney to continue down the road that we described for him. I think, Mr. Sofredo, the memo clearly says we don't have a right to say anything about the content of the sign. I'm hoping that maybe we can get to the location of the sign more in the sense, not as a means of regulating free speech, but as to try to clean up the front yard.
Yeah.
Mr. Van Cleef?
Is there parking allowed in front of this property?
The very, very narrow road right there.
You know if the regulation allows parking?
Mr. Petremont?
Public street.
A 40-foot tractor trailer could be parked in front of their block. I'm just thinking outside, never mind.
No, I mean, we're going down, if we go down that road,
Just a trailer, Frank.
you look at the size of the street, it's not a very wide right of way. It's one of the older streets, probably only 30 feet wide, if that.
So
So,
you can park the trailer on his front yard.
I think everything you're saying now, a public meeting can be used against you in court of law. Public meeting. You're trying to
so
skirt
if
around
you
something.
could take and, at some point, just mark the center line, we'll figure out from there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kovacs. The next item on our agenda relates to a request again by Ms. Hartman on the matter of the RRA. This memo is in the package that is on the town's website. I will basically read a summary of it for the town board and the public's information. The first matter was the town had requested a limitation as related to a radius from the facility in bringing in food wastes to the facility, so we would not repeat the initial problems of the county of Westchester disposing of food waste in Ulster County. It has been suggested to me, and I have not had time to validate it. The 25-mile radius is contained in the budget law passed in 2019. And it creates an obligation for the generators of food waste within certain categories to dispose of those food wastes within that 25-mile radius. And with the maps that were provided by the RRA, it showed the location of generators and other facility similar to theirs. I think we can be safe to understand that there are alternate facilities that did not exist at the time that the county of Westchester brought their waste up here. And I would suggest that once we validate the 25-mile rule, the town board should have no longer have a concern over the importation outside in excess of the 25-mile radius. The second matter related to a request by the town board of the agency that they be a good neighbor and that they appear before the Town of Ulster Planning Board, they contemplate any kind of expansions. This idea was discussed at the July 26, 2021 RRA board meeting. It is available, a video of that meeting is available on the agency's website of that discussion, but in summary, they are making a commitment that they will be before the Town of Ulster's Planning Board as a courtesy when they make their plans to do anything that relate to an expansion. It was also noted to me in this memo that any expansion is subject to a permit modification by the New York State DEC and the Town of Ulster, by its statutory authority of being the home to the DEC, is a notified partner in that process of modification. So we will have notice and we will follow up.
Would it be a secret process?
We don't have a secret process, Eric. It is a secret process related to them as their agency board. And finally, the issue of the odors. I believe, who was I speaking to today? Mr. Van Cleef.
I can't hear you.
You also put my name on it too. So
No.
get the link for that.
You mentioned you had a visit down there and you,
I'm impressed that they are doing their work that they said they would. They're using bigger equipment to foot the pile. They are doing that air circulation that I think Tim McGrath was here. He and his team explained they are making an effort. Is it fully successful? No, but it's going in the right direction. They're not ignoring us. And they'll put all the concrete down. They've got the hard surface. It seems to be heading in the right direction.
and they did indicate that their existing New York State DEC permit requires an odor plan, and that will result in any violations relating to odors to be reported to the DEC. And they make mention in here that since the July 15th meeting, the agency has received 0 odor complaints and has had 2 New York State DEC environmental monitor inspections with no violations for odors. I don't think this concludes any actions by the town board. It just gives us a briefing as to where we are. In the Freeman article recently, it was suggested that some of the odors were coming from the Whittier wastewater treatment plant. This afternoon, Mr. Majori and I, the superintendent of the wastewater department, had a discussion. We will be putting a weather station at the Whittier wastewater treatment plant to record environmental conditions. And it will be linked back to the main wastewater treatment plant on Dogwood Street via a modem, cellular modem, so that we can monitor it in real time as conditions change.
I think we should make a point of asking the town residents to let us know if there's an open. What the UCRA needs is to have complaints, because then they take those complaints and they issue it to their staff, try to chase down the problem. With the absence of complaints, they're not going to do anything. And I know we think we're yelling at somebody who's not listening. However, I believe that if we can document on date, on time, that we're complaining about the odors, and if we could somehow facilitate our residents in doing that, that it will arm someone like Tim McGrath with the things he needs to better correct the problem. But if we all don't say anything, which apparently none of us did since the last meeting, I didn't report the smell, I probably should have. But if we could do that in a concerted effort, it would help them have reason to act. So I would encourage all of us in this community to
Continue to report any odors that you might smell to the supervisor's office, in addition to directly reporting them to the RRA so that they can follow up on them. And as long as we have notice, we'll be able to understand whether they followed up appropriately or not. And the final item on our agenda, Mr. Berardi, it relates to the question over the Bearcat vehicle. Would you please present to the town and the residents the current situation with the rules and regulations.
Good evening. Good evening. I submitted a memo along with sample policy or draft policy to the board this past week. Relative to the policy was developed by the City of Kingston Police Department. Basically, they just wrote it before we did. It was submitted myself for approval. Originally, prior to even the purchase vehicle, the decision was made between myself and the Chief of Kingston Police Department that we would have an identical policy as to not interfere with the correct operation or proper operation of it. So we wanted both of our policies to read the same. Upon reading the policy, majority of the policy was sufficient and covered all bases. Although one matter wasn't explicitly mentioned relative to when it's not to be utilized, and that is for public display and parades. After discussion with Chief Tinty, he agreed that would be sufficient to add. So I added it to the policy. Once the board approves this current policy, Kingston will go back and amend theirs to mirror the changes that we have made. I feel the policy, like I said before, is very sufficient. It outlines the proper use, who is to operate it, when it is to be operated, and who gives approval for it to be deployed. And that is solely based on the chief of police from both agencies give that approval.
Mr. Van Cleef?
Do both chiefs have to approve it or just one chief? So if you were out in the city of Kingston, if their chief says the ESC's authority, is that adequate for it to roll?
Yes, as long as the chief of jurisdiction is to be utilized in approves the deployment of it, then yes.
Or the lieutenant, if the chief's not. about-
Or is
It's the
designated.
second in command.
In Kingston, it's deputy chief, and town of Ulster would be the lieutenant.
Okay, the policy is on the town's website in the materials for tonight's meeting. It is being presented to the town board for a vote at a future meeting. There's no action that's going to be taken on this tonight. Thank you, Mr. Berardi. I don't see Mr. Albert. I guess they never came tonight. The town was presented an opportunity by two members of the veterans community to engage in a discussion about putting up flags and banners in the town of Ulster commemorating the military service of residents of the town of Ulster. You see, when you go into the city of Kingston, these banners are in many, many places up and down Broadway. That was through the efforts of the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars and this committee that was supposed to have come here tonight to educate the community and the town board about what they would propose to do in the town. We will leave this matter on a future agenda, and I will contact them tomorrow to find out what happened. Now, that concludes tonight's agenda. We have a 7:10 public hearing on the 2022 preliminary budget. But before I do the public hearing, I'd like to take the opportunity to make a presentation that is on the screen in the back of the room. For those of you who might not be able to see the screen, there is a number of copies that are on the railing in the front of the room. Go ahead, please share the file. Next page, please. Please go down. This is a summary statement of the most salient facts that are contained within our budget this year. normally when the Kingston Freeman writes an article, they write about who gets paid. So that top section there shows the salaries. Last year, the salaries proposed, the change in dollars, and whether the individuals receive health insurance or not. Hopefully that puts to rest many of the questions from the public about how well the elected officials are compensated. Underneath that, if you could scroll down, is the summary tax rate and levy calculation that shows the general fund tax levy from the 2021 year compared to the proposed rate, showing a $295,000 change or increase in the tax levy. And for the highway department, it shows the 2021 and 2022 tax levies and a $10,432 change year to year. On a total basis, that's $305,000. And the reason these two funds are combined is that these are the two town-wide funds that the Town of Ulstertown Board has jurisdiction over. Every other fund within the budget relates to a smaller geographical area and is designed for the services that are rendered in those areas. The conclusion is that on a tax levy basis, it is a 3.42% increase. Now, further on in this presentation are details breaking down the two numbers of the change here and what generates or gives the reason for the increases. The next lines show the assessment base. Go back up, please. This is the method of allocation of the tax levy to the individual property owners. We determine a tax rate based upon the total assessed value within the town. And as you can see, in 2021, it was $9.21 or $9.22 per thousand of value. And in 2022, it is proposed to be $9.53 per thousand, which reflects a 3.4% increase in the allocation. Now, the reason that this is important is that our assessed values change from year to year based upon the amount of new construction that are put in place, the amount of tax certiorari actions that we have to defend against, and the various subdivisions that create new value within the town. So this goes in both directions. The total assessed value of the town is down approximately $100,000 plus when compared to the 2010 year when I came into office, which is primarily a result of the tax certiorari actions at Tech City and the Hudson Valley Mall. And we continue to fight tax certiorari actions every year. And we currently have about nine actions in front of the court, totaling about an $80 million potential reduction, which we don't believe to be realistic because of some of the values that these people have ascribed to their properties are not realistic. They are just the starting point for a negotiation. Now, I do want to say the bottom paragraph there, this was distributed on the town's website 2 weeks ago. It is still there. Copies are up front, and it will remain up for people who want to look at it. But the point of the last paragraph is the town is within the 2% tax cap legislation because in 2021, we did not use all of the tax cap, and under the law, there is a carry forward of a portion of the unused capacity to future periods. That is why we are at 3.42, which is 1.42% in excess of the tax cap. The second point I want to make is that the tax cap is calculated on a town-wide basis by summing up the tax levies of all the funds that the town board has direct responsibility for. That would include all the water districts, all the sewer districts, all the lighting districts. They are all added into the calculation, and if you looked at the detailed budget that was presented, every single sub-district had a decrease in their tax levy, the benefit of which inured to the general fund and the highway fund in the tax cap calculation. A question was asked last week, you can move on to the next slide, to explain the organizational structure of the town. As you can see, we have the public at the top, the town board. The public elects the justices, the town clerk, the highway superintendent, and the town board. Collectively, these offices are responsible to the public. But each of the sub-offices of the other elected officials have a financial responsibility to the town of Ulster Town Board. The supervisor, by delegation, by resolution at the beginning of the year, is delegated operating authority for the town and jurisdiction over the general fund, the sewer fund, the water funds, and the special district. And that includes also the financial responsibility for oversight of the highway department. In this box here, and the boxes that are across this line, you will see the breakdowns of functions that are included in each of these categories. For example, in the general fund, the assessor, the supervisor, the police department, the building department, parks and recs, code enforcement, the planning department, and transfer station are parts of the general fund. The sewer funds are special district funds, limited to providing services in small geographic areas within the town, and includes Whittier, the Ulster Sewer District, the Washington Avenue Sewer District, and the newly created Spring Lake Sewer District. The Water District, again, special district, created to provide services in limited geographical areas within town, includes the Ulster Water District, the Halcyon Park Water District, the Spring Lake Water District, the Bright Acres Water District, the Cherry Hill Water District, the Glenary and East Kingston Water District. And then we have the absolute special districts. These would include all the lighting districts within the town that are specific to neighborhoods, and the East Kingston the East Kingston Fire Protection District, which provides fire service through a relationship with the East Kingston Fire Company to the residents within the district. In addition to all these activities within the town that the town board has responsibility for, we have several independent special districts. The biggest one being the Town of Ulster Library District, which is a town-wide district and has a separate board of trustees, publicly elected at an election in October, or I should say, when is it, Susie, in May? September. So the board of the library has a election for trustees and an approval of their budget in September by public vote. And the fire companies have an independent board of fire commissioners, and they have public meetings in October to take public input on their budgets and to take a vote on the approval after the public hearing on the budget. I want to mention these two categories. They get less attendance than the town board does. Go ahead to the next. Where do the general fund expenses go? These are the 2022 budgeted expenditures as presented in the document. And as you can see, they are broken down by category. This is direct compensation of town employees. This is the fringe benefit related to the compensation, and combining these two, the town's employees in the general fund represent 80% of the expenses of the town's general fund. The only way to cut the size of the allocation to these two categories are to cut personnel. We have union contracts for the police, and we have union contracts for the general town employees. And then there are several appointed employees that support elected officials, all within this category. And the head count has decreased between 2010 and 2021. Contractual represents insurance, legal, electric, gas, repairs to buildings, anything of an operating nature. And as you can see, it is only 18% of our budget. So in other words, I can turn out the lights, turn off the gas, turn off the heat. We won't save a whole lot of money on the overall budget. This thin little sliver here represents the budgeted capital improvements for the general fund, which would include improvements to the town of Ulster town buildings, being the general town hall, the senior center, and the highway garage complex. They are responsibilities of the general fund. Included in this sliver is $115,000 for the replacement on an annual basis of police cars, replacements of computers, replacements of radios, and other capital items of that nature. The next chart, please. This is a detailed chart that it relates to the pie chart previously given. It shows you the 2019 actual expenditures, the 2020 actual expenditures, the 2021 budgeted expenditures, and the 2022 budgeted expenditures. As you can see, salaries are the line item that has the greatest dollar and the greatest percentage increase in the expenditures of the town. There's only a $2,000 difference between the 2021 and the 2022 budget for capital items. There is a $29,916 change for contractual items and a $46,281 difference in employee benefits. In the appendix of the package is a complete breakdown of every line item that supports this, so you can go see which department is getting the most money of this increase here. You can see which line items are driving these increases, and you will also see the line expenditures that have been cut that produce a net change of $367,000 in expenses. Next, please. This is a pie chart showing the revenues projected for 2022 of the Town of Ulster General Fund. As you can see, this is the largest block. This represents real estate tax. We have a number of non-tax items related to the use of money. Anybody has gone to the bank to put a deposit in knows that today's interest rates are low, very, very low. This has decreased substantially over the years. Non-proprietary taxes and non-property taxes and fees are in there. Other tax items, federal aid, departmental income, sale of property, insurance recoveries, license and permits, miscellaneous. Fines and forfeitures. Right here is the green, the dark, the light green. It's 4.7%. This is the net revenues, or I should say, these are the gross revenues that are received by the Town of Ulster from the Justice Court operations here, net of remittances to the New York State government and the Ulster County government for their share in traffic fines. This took a substantial hit in 2020 due to COVID-19 because the courts were closed. It has not recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and we are still struggling to find out why. In addition, there was a law change in Albany by the state legislature related to unpaid traffic fines. Unpaid traffic fines used to result in a suspension of a license, which was kind of a encouragement for the people to pay the fines. Well, licenses are no longer suspended when you don't pay your fine. So the conclusion is, why pay your fine? In addition, the town court has a large backlog of unpaid fines, which we have been told to wipe off our books and turn over to a civil collection agency for a contract collection matter. We have been forced to hire a special part-time clerk to go back through 20 years of suspensions and unpaid fines to aggregate this information so that they can go through the computer system and restore everyone's driver's license. The reason behind the law change was there's a philosophy is that if you don't have a driver's license, you can't get a job, therefore you can't earn money to support your family. Next page, please. This is a detailed breakdown by the line items, the categories within the pie chart. Again, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. And the primary driver of, as you can see, it's 295,000, which relates back to the increase in the real estate taxes for the general fund. You can see what changes within the revenues cause the property taxes to go up. When these line items go down, we have no place to get the money other than fund balance here or raise taxes. When these items go up, we hope to restore the fund balance and drive this number down. Right now, as you can see, non-property taxes and fees are scheduled to go up 32,000. Departmental income is 71,000. Licenses and permits are budgeted to go up $25,000. This relates to building permits and fees that come in from the building department. We expect with the redevelopment of Tech City and the Hudson Valley Mall to have more activity in the planning board next year. You see a decrease in the fines and forfeitures of $30,000. You see a decrease in the amount of interest income of $25,000. You see an increase in state aid of $53,000, which includes mortgage recording tax receipts and the AIM funding that is provided by the state to the town in December. Last year, we were told that in 2021, AIM funding was going to be cut 20%. Lo and behold, at the end of the year, after we had finished the 2021 budget, the governor found the money in the budget and paid 100% of what the budgeted income is or was for the AIM funding. We have sale of properties for $40,000, and we have miscellaneous of $5,000. And here is the appropriation from fund balance and special reserves. In 2021, we planned on $555,000. In 2022, we have $455,000. I want to stress these numbers are the preliminary budget, which is the direct role of the tentative budget. They will be adjusted for several items that have come to our knowledge over the last several weeks since the publication of the tentative budget. For example, trends in the justice court are up. This will change. This will increase. We will probably end up increasing the application of the fund balance to this year's tax levy. But on the other side, we also have increases in expenses, as Chief Girardi has asked for another police officer, because we are expecting retirements next year. We like to have them on the force before the officers retire so we can respond. Our current budget for fuel is currently $2.75 a gallon. That was what the budget was budgeted on. Last week's deliveries were $2.83. So we may have some revisions in our fuel expense, which we hope to make up for increased revenues here, so that we don't result in any changes to the tax levy. In addition, the town's fixed price contracts for electric and gas for the town's facility mature in January. And if anybody has natural gas at home, you know the prices have gone through the roof. Next slide. This shows the pie chart for the highway expenses for the highway department. Between direct employee compensation and benefits, you're looking at 64%. These two total, I'm sorry, employee benefits are the blue, the 37 and 27, these two right here are 64%. The reason that this is smaller than the general fund, Mr. Petromall has a larger capital budget as it costs about $250,000 a year to replace each snowplow truck. He budgets $225,000 a year for blacktop replacement. And that's all in these two items. We also have salt. We have a high amount of petroleum products. We have pipe. We have a couple of $100,000 in repair parts between tires and parts and oil solvents and everything else in here to keep the equipment running. Next slide, please. This is again in relation to the pie chart, shows you the breakdown of the categories. It shows you the actual 2019, 20, 21, 22. There's a $5,000 reduction in general government support, which is related to claims, judgments and claims. Invariably, during the course of a winter, the car gets hit, some damage is caused to property. We pay for this through judgment and claim. We're hoping our plow operators next year are more efficient and avoid the cars. Employee compensation, as you can see, is $33,000. This is driven by a contract increase and step changes, along with increased longevity. These are parts of our local 17 contract. There are no changes in capital items. Our contractual items go up $16,500. Employee benefits go down $20,566. Now, I want to note we received substantial increases in our health insurance premiums for our renewals coming up in December and January. The reason employee benefits go down, retirees reach age 65, they move from a full health insurance policy to Medicare, which is a much lower cost. That is detailed in the back section of the big budget document by employee. You can see if you compare that section to last year, the section who has moved into the next category. We have changes in marital status. Some people get married, some people get divorced, some people take the buyouts. They change categories. That has a material impact and drives the change of this number. Again, at the bottom of this page, it refers you back to a detailed schedule on the changes between 2022 and 2021 in the appendix. Next slide, please. Where do the town's highways revenues come from? This big blue spot, 86% is the real estate tax levy. They really don't charge a lot to other funds. Now, I want to note, the town of Ulster has been fortunate in obtaining grant funding for capital projects. When we obtain those grant funds and the town highway department performs the work, they get reimbursed for the equipment usage and the man time with benefits for the project. That increases the section called departmental income, which is the gray sliver here. There's not a lot of it right now. We have adopted a policy at the town board that when the highway department gets revenue from the use of its machines, that revenue is dedicated to the capital reserve account for the purchases of future equipment. 2011 and 2012, as a result of the FEMA project, we were able to replace two plow trucks totaling approximately, I think it was at that time, $450,000, $475,000 out of the profits that were earned from the FEMA revenues that were used to restore the improvements within the town. The town highway departments performed the Katrine Lane Sewer Improvement District construction, the Spring Lake Sewer Improvement District construction, did a portion of the Brigham Lane water extension, and has done extensive stormwater repairs from a grant in Glen Eyrie
And all those revenues went back into the budget to help build up the capital reserve so that we have been able to basically replace the fleet of the highway equipment without borrowing a dollar from the public markets to buy capital equipment. Next slide, please. This is the detailed breakdown schedule. It shows you that real estate taxes went up $10,000. Other tax items, which is going up $1,700, this comes from pilots. Departmental income is $15,000. Use of property and money, that's the interest earned, goes down $3,000, and miscellaneous went down $55. That's a total change of $24,077, which balances with the total change on the revenue slide, or I'm sorry, with the expense slide, so that you can see how that affects the tax base. Next slide. This is a presentation of the fund slide, the fund balance slide from 2019. What is the fund balance? It is the monies left over when you deduct the expenses from the revenues. And there are times when the revenues don't cover the expenses, and therefore the money comes back out of the fund balance. And the point that I wanted to make at the bottom is that we have applied fund balance to the 22 budgets, but that unappropriated fund balance can run out. It is not a perpetual piggy bank. Next slide, please. These are for the data geeks amongst you. These are the detailed appendix relating to the general fund, the highway fund revenue and expenses. Next page, line item by line item, you can see 2 years comparison along with the dollar change in each year. We can go through the highway department. I want to get to the reserve presentation. Next, please. Next. Next. This is on the town's website. This is presented annually. This is a summary as of September 30th of all the reserve accounts that are on the town's books. In the general fund, we have what's a category called not in spendable form. These are essentially prepaid expenses that were paid in the prior period, and they cannot be spent. They cannot be turned into cash, and they cannot be spent. The next section is a listing, as we were asked what was in our reserves and what were we planning on spending it for. The first item is landfill closure. It is a reserve account that was created in 1988 for the eventual closure of the town of Ulster landfill. At one time, it had $2.5 million in it to protect the town from unforeseen costs related to any environmental damage caused by the town of Ulster landfill, which was sold to the RRA in 1992. The RRA assumed responsibilities of closure of that fund, which removed most of the financial burden from the town. But there is a clause in all the contracts that say if there is ever any liability that can be traced back to the period of time of the town of Ulster's ownership, the town of Ulster will have to pay the damages related to the corrections of that item. That's why we have a balance in the landfill closure. This account has been used repeatedly over the last 20 years for general capital improvements throughout the town. It paid $178,000 last year to the Housing Park Water District as a capital contribution to build the Housing Park water tank. It paid for the senior center next door. It paid off the debt that was borrowed in 2019. That was a 15-year schedule against equipment that had a 10-year life. We started selling trucks off, but we still owed debt on those trucks in 2018 or 19. So we took $200,000 out of landfill closure and paid off the debt so that we could be debt-free for equipment that we didn't own anymore. The next item is for building reserves. That is a $586,000 line item. This is a new reserve that was created by the town board 2 years ago or 3 years ago, based upon an
our architect's estimate for the renovation costs for the police department and the basement. In 2020, we had a discussion about this building reserve and whether it was appropriate to spend $500,000 on essentially a 50-year-old farm building, which is the town hall. We put together a project headed up by Mr. Van Cleef and Chief Berardi, and we did renovations in the basement for substantially less than that. We were able to remove the trailers in the parking lot and move all the officers back in. We completed the lighting. We retrofit the high efficiency fixtures in the basement for, I think, less than $70,000. In addition, the town board approved the installation of an emergency generator outside, which has recently been completed. That will be taken out of this reserve fund. The ceiling and the front doors that have been recently renovated in this room and in the front doors of this building, the monies that were not paid for, that were not received from the Justice Court, the Justice Court grants did not cover the cost of the entire improvements, will be funded out of this reserve. The next line item is the East Kingston Fire Protection Reserve. It is a holdback of a contractual obligation that the town has to the East Kingston Fire Company. Under the agreement with the RRA, we're supposed to pay them 25 cents a ton for every ton that goes through the transfer station. East Kingston desperately needs a new firehouse. We are aggregating the monies in this account, hopefully to build it up, be able to identify a site and help kick off a new firehouse in East Kingston. The recreation equipment and facilities primarily result from a $1,500 per apartment fee that is paid by apartment developers. Money from this fund was used to build using the highway department, who received the financial benefit of the labor reimbursement and the machine reimbursement, the rail trail parking lot on Rockwell Lane on the south side of the town for about $45,000 5 years ago. The rest of the reserves are related to law enforcement activities and recreational activities, and they move around all the time. Question was posed about the town's funding of employee benefits. The next two accounts show the funding of the obligations that the town has. When an employee separates from service with the town of Ulster, they are entitled to a full buyout of their accumulated sick time, vacation time, personal time, compensation time, any time categories under their collective bargaining agreement. This $879,000 at September 30th represents the full amount of the liability that the town had on its books at December 31st, 2021, in order to liquidate those expenses when an employee leaves. I want to note that when I took office, this account only had $100,000 in it and couldn't pay off 2 police officers retiring in 1 year. When we have police officers retiring, there are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 payouts of accrued vacation and sick time, and that plays havoc with the operating budget. So this reserve fund is designed to level out those impacts on the operating budget. When a town employee leaves, they are entitled to a pension. On an annual basis, the town pays a payment to the New York State Pension Fund, which funds the pension payments that the retired employee receives. We also get a statement under the new accounting standards every year from the State Pension Fund as to how much the town would owe the State Pension Fund on that date if the pension fund was liquidated. That number is disclosed in the financial statements and approximates $6.6 million. Since there is a statutory right to establish a retirement contribution reserve, we felt it was prudent to put some money aside to mitigate. It's not going to entirely resolve the $6.6 million problem, but should there be a special assessment coming out of retirement system due to inadequate returns as there was after the 2000 tech crash in the stock market. We would have money set aside again, not to impact the operating budget. The third category that an employee receives when they leave the town is a promise of lifetime health insurance under their collective bargaining agreements. There currently exists no statutory authority for the town to fund an account to pay those obligations. The present value of the current liability to the town for current retirees and employees across the entire base of the town is $38 million. What happens is we are on a pay-go system. And next year's budget, when we have 3 police officers planning on retiring in 2023, you will see a $100,000 increase in retirement health care for those 3 police officers. That's called pay-go. We have no ability to fund that. So in response to the question about have we provided for our entire employee benefits, which are an increasing portion of our operating expenses, we are doing the best we can under the circumstances. I'm not going to bore you, but the next section is the highway fund. The biggest reserve in the capital area is an equipment reserve, which has $373,000 currently. That is an accumulation of deposits made under a town policy that basically says if the highway superintendent does not spend his budgeted capital line item for equipment replacement in a year, the difference between his actual expenditures and the budget is deposited into this account. So he has the ability to replace the equipment in the future. In addition, we also make deposits into this account from revenues that are earned by the use of highway equipment on special projects throughout the town. This fund, along with the budgeted amount in the operating fund of the town highway department, has been sufficient to carry our capital needs and replace a plow truck a year, and in some years, a couple of pickup trucks or a backhoe, whatever, but we have not borrowed a dime to replace any of the capital equipment. I want to note, if you were to pay attention to the city of Kingston's budget, they are borrowing on an annual basis to replace police cars. We fund that out of an operating budget line item. The next, I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but the next section I do want to call to your attention is the sewer fund. The biggest reserve is the Ulster wastewater treatment plant for almost $3 million. We have an engineer's report that sets forth the cost of the renovations to the Ulster wastewater treatment plant of $6 million. We are attempting to do that without borrowing. We are taking the project incrementally, doing it through in-house labor. We have just recently completed the replacement of the boiler for $300,000. We have a debris screening system in process of being installed, which is an approximate $200,000 in-house project. These projects, doing them in-house, save us money and help us avoid borrowing. The last page shows the water department, and there's only one fund to specifically call out. It is the Ulster Water District. It has a capital reserve of $786,000. That is the capital reserve we are speaking about tonight in the resolution to use for the replacement of the south water tank. The next section I'm not going to bore you with, but it's the fund balance policy that sets forth the definitions of the various accounts. It defines what capital reserves the town board has created and when they created them, and sets forth the town's policy on funding those reserve accounts. So, Mr. Obajewski, I think I've covered every single one of the topics that you had presented to the town last week in your 2-page letter, except for the question: does the town have a tax stabilization reserve allowed by the Office of Support of the State Controller? The town does not have a tax stabilization reserve because the town is not eligible to maintain one based upon page 12 of the reserve publication of the town of the New York State Controllers. It's called Contingency and Tax Stabilization Reserve Fund under General Municipal Law, Section 6C. I'll be glad to give you the page. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the supervisor's presentation in summary format of the budget. This presentation is up here if you want it. It's on the town's website. It relates back to the document that has been on the town's website for almost a month now. So may I have a motion to open the public
So
hearing?
moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. So, there are any, please. You can push the button down.
Okay, thank you. My name is Regis Oberjeski, 170 Leadville, Town of Ulster. That was a remarkable presentation. I think we covered just about everything that we had, and you've included, things that we talked about in previous years. My comments tonight are cover four areas, but I'm only going to talk about one of them. I'll just say the first one is the preliminary budget presentation. So I read it. Yeah, it's great. It answers a lot of questions very clearly. The second point is really a suggestion, and it really has to do with the 6 pages that you scroll through in the beginning. I think there is another way to approach that, and I'll leave that for you. We've talked about this before. The third really has to do with the tax stabilization review. I didn't know about not a lot of us to have that. So I will throw that. The fourth point really has to do with the assigned fund balance. And I'm going to just approach this from the point of view of actuals and not to try to confuse budgeted with actuals. So let me read it. I'll be expeditious. Over the past few years, we have attempted to demonstrate that there was no need to raise town property taxes because the town's robust unassigned fund balances more than cover the projected expenditure increases. Nevertheless, each year the town board proceeded with the tax increases at or near the percentage presented in the preliminary budget. The remainder of our remarks are a summary of our understanding of the town's unassigned fund balance. According to the town's fund balance policy, quote, the unassigned unrestricted fund balance for the general fund should not be less than 5%, not more than 10% of the total adopted budget expenditures of the general fund. This level of funding seems to be reasonable from a budget point of view. However, this reasonability in the budget process is not what happens in fact. Over the past 5 years, EFPR, the independent auditors that we hire each year, has said, and I looked at 5 years, the one being 2020, which was just 10 months ago, these are actuals, 2019, 18, 17, and 16. And the last year, at the end of last year, in the calendar year, the unassigned fund balance was 3.24 million, which is really 22% of the total. Because at the end of last year, the total fund balance reported by the auditors was 14.9 change, almost 15 million. And 22% of that, which is the 3.24, was reported at 41.3% of the general fund expenditures. It's relating that to the 10% budgeted, your actuals. In 19, it was 33%, 18, it was 22%, 23%. In 17, it was 25%, in 16, it was 26% of the general fund. If we average those 5 years together, each year we realized about 2.3 million, or nearly 30% of the general fund expenditure. And that's those are the audited figures, year-end, actually. We're not attempting to confuse the adopted budgeted expenditures with actual expenditures. of the fund. Rather, we're juxtaposing, putting alongside each other, the budgeted expenditures and allocations with their results over a 5-year period. And we understand that the art and craft of budgeting is based on the experience of the town's business, and should come as close as possible to the projected expenditures, including fund balance projections. In the area of unassigned fund balance, our town's actual expenses and budget projections are consistently out of whack by about 20%. Is this abundance unexpected good luck, accidental underestimation, or a deliberate pattern of the town board town board planning, and coupled with experienced management? We think our comfortable unassigned unrestricted fund balance is not about luck. It's not about forecasting ineptitude, for sure. But rather a deliberate plan to fatten the unassigned fund balance beyond what the policy states is reasonable, at 10%. We're not accusing the board of violating town policy, but we are pointing out the consistent disconnect between the policy on the size of the unassigned fund balance, 10%, and the actual results of that policy that is reported annually, averaging nearly 30% each year for the last 5 years. Again, the reason for this commentary is that the town board administers an ever repeatable increase in property tax in spite of substantial annual surpluses that can cover the projected shortfalls for the coming year. 2022 is no exception. Please do not raise our effective taxes. It's not necessary. Thank you.
I will take the opportunity to respond directly to those questions right now. Mr. Obujeski, when I came into office, previous supervisor had borrowed $1.2 million to pay a tax surcharge action. We were in a hole. He borrowed under state statute with the ability to pay that loan back over 20 years. How would you feel today about paying for an expense that happened 12, 14 years ago? I don't think you'd feel very well. Well, we worked a financial plan that allowed us to pay that loan off in 5 years. And we don't have to worry about it. 2016, there was an appellate court decision out of Albany on a tax surcharge case with Tech City. The exposure to the town was in excess of $1 million. The town was able to use its fund balance to write a check for $443,000 to liquidate a portion of the obligation. That remaining obligation remains outstanding. It is subject to repayment to the county when the taxes are paid. You propose that I borrow that money when that time comes? I don't feel comfortable doing it. When the Hudson Valley Mall tax surcharge action was settled, the town wrote a rather large check to the mall owner and liquidated that liability, avoiding borrowing and paying it back over the future of 20 years. The Police Reform Committee proposed proposed body cameras for the officers. And we didn't hesitate in taking that up because we knew the $139,000 was going to come out of fund balance. I could go on and on and on about the expenses that we have been able to fund out of that accumulated fund balance because of its availability. The numbers that you were citing are undisputable, but you leave out a specific action that the town board takes in May, June, or July of the year. Our fund balance calls for the presentation of an audited financial statement before we allocate monies from the unassigned fund balances of all the funds in the town to specific reserves. There is a Excel spreadsheet in the minutes going back 6 years during that period of time that shows the December 31st numbers that you got, the percentages and the calculations by which the fund balance is over the stated numbers in the fund balance policy and what the town desires to do. We were remiss in 2021 of doing that allocation because we had a lot going on. There's a lot of capital improvement programs going on that will cause deficits in various districts that will be funded out of fund balance. In addition, 2020 was a really, really high. The town self-funds for those employees on the alternate insurance fund a high deductible, 100%. And we fund 100% when they use it. 2020, nobody went to the doctor. And the town enjoyed a benefit of $320,000 of saved medical insurance in the general fund. Now, I showed you this, and I'm giving you this. There are other offices in the state controller's publications that say one-time windfall should be used for one-time expenses. And that's what this town board has adopted. What you see, you might consider to be luck. But there are years when the ticket production in this town justice court has exceeded projections because the governor ordered the state police to go on a cell phone ticketing bench, and we were the benefit of it. There are times, like when Tenbrook Commons transferred ownership, we got $140,000 one time in mortgage recording tax. These types of transactions are few and far between, but these are the one-time revenue enhancements that come in out of the clear blue sky, and we put them aside for the problems that come about in the operations of the police department. It was 5 years ago they came to me and they told me that the main dispatch board can no longer be serviced, and we spent $110,000 replacing it at a fund balance. I have been just informed that our radio vendor told us we have to replace 30 radios in the cars at $5,000 a piece by the end of next year. It's going to come out of fund balance. We bought the armored vehicle and paid our contribution out of fund balance. We're paying for the body cam out of fund balance. If I had to budget, like I did this year for the replacement of the in-car computer, for every single capital line item in every single department, we couldn't afford to pay the tax. We get lucky and we plan on using those lucky revenues to pay for those one-time expenses. I respect what you put here. This is a lot of work. But there's a plan. And yes, we do have a plan. We plan to keep the town financially solid. There's going to come a time when this building no longer functions. And right now, the current cost to replace it is $15 million. I can't, in good conscience, convince the citizens of this town to approve a $15 million budget bond issue to pay for it. I'm also not going to create a fund reserve accumulating $15 million, but we're going to try to figure out some balance in there, which is exactly what we did with the water storage tank in the Ulster Water. So yes, we save our testing
No,
for the winter,
yeah,
and the winter's coming.
and I know that you do, and I would never ever point a finger at how this town is managed, much less even suggest that there's mismanagement. What I'm saying is, in the spirit of transparency, there were numbers here that weren't discussed tonight. These are those. These are the ones. And when you were showing blanks for 2019 and 2020 actual fund balance or lines, because you're talking about budget, you're talking about 550,000. Right?
We didn't use fund balance in that year. We didn't, we generated fund balance. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Revenues exceeded expenses in those years. They were one-time revenues and we had one-time savings and expenses.
It really, when you're talking about budget and actuals, they're two very different concepts. I mean, they're related, of course, but they are different concepts. And my point was that those numbers really should be spoken. And with regard to the 10% cap on fund balance to general fund expenditures, you can make that 20%, you can make that 30%. The percentage doesn't matter. I looked at a lot of different documents from OSC to see if there were percentage restrictions on. It really is what you consider to be reasonable.
That is correct.
And so the 10% that you have there in policy is not reasonable for your plan.
That 10% based upon recent studies from the PFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association, the nationwide association of accountants. They have recommended a 15% base level reserve in the general fund. So this is not something that I wanted to put on the table at this point in time, but we will have to bring it back to have a discussion about modifying the percentage.
And so the only room we would have to comment on the budget for 2022 are really from two places that you suggested. You're either talking about personnel, that's 80 some odd, or the fund balance. And so I'm saying the fund balance is there. And I know what you mean about one-time costs and ongoing costs, and I get it, but the money is there.
If you pay attention to my budgets going back to 2011, you will always notice that the numbers usually come out lower than the first numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I only did 5 years. Okay, thanks a lot.
Next. Laura?
Good evening, Laura Hartman, 44 Haskell Avenue. I am commenting on the budget tonight. Town of Ulster citizens have asked you not to raise back taxes for the last 3 or 4 years, and you've done so anyway. You did it last year in the middle of the pandemic. Even though it was a small amount, it added to residents' financial burden. Adding more taxes again this year as we are trying to recover again adds to our burden. I know that my industry is not recovered yet, and I'm not alone in this situation. It makes no sense to raise taxes when the town clearly has the money to cover these additional expenses in the unassigned fund balance. And that brings us back to that question, which you have now more answered. But during the July 1st meeting, you said, Mr. Quigley, that I have got money in the bank. We are more prone to acting than to sit around and talk about it, which is exactly what you described here tonight. That we don't need to wait for grants. You got that pronoun wrong, however, and it is not your money. It belongs to the residents in the town of Ulster. And currently the town is holding on to money for exactly what we don't know, although we have a clear picture of what you just said tonight. But surely residents could really use a break by using some of our money that you are holding on to and not ask them to give you more. The town can afford to pay this difference in the budget without any ill effects. The city of Kingston is not raising taxes, the county is lowering them. Why do we always have increases here? And again, you did address something with the city of Kingston. I will acknowledge that. But I would like to ask you to understand the financial difficulties of many of the town's residents and not raise our taxes again this year. Thank you.
So directly responding to your point about the difference between the town of Ulster and the city of Kingston. We received $1.3 million in ARPA aid on a $17 million budget. City of Kingston received $18 million in ARPA aid on a $40 million budget. And the county, I think, received $38 million or more on a $300 million budget.
In other words, they got more money than we got. And they have more opportunities to use that money throughout their budget to mitigate any types of taxes. In addition, they both get substantial portions of federal aid. And I know you're paying attention to what's going on in Washington. They are shoveling the money to the local community, but we're not one of them. It's going to the county, it's going to the school district, it's going to the city. We have to fend for ourselves.
So why isn't it coming here?
Why don't you ask the Congressman? Do you have any additional comments? Mr. Guarini, I see you moving. Are you moving to the podium? I didn't mean to call you out. I thought I'd be proactive.
No, thank you. My name is Vicky Green, and, I don't really have a written comment, although I do want to say that I don't want no because we see the increase in our taxes every single year. And yeah, it's starting to get in people's budgets. I mean, the pandemic has caused a lot of havoc in everybody's lives, including the county. Food prices are going up. Gas prices are going up. Right, so. you know, it's starting to-
Thank you. Any additional public comment? And I won't call on anybody if I see a move, I promise. I have a motion to close the public hearing. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our scheduled agenda for tonight. It's at this point in the meeting where I open the floor to public comment on any topic. And I am pleased to open the floor for anyone to say anything to the town board. Starting again.
I just wanted to say thank you for the follow-up on the 3 items that you included in the agenda. I was happy to read Mr. Farrar's 2 priorities, policy for the Bearcat, in the answer on the signage, and also what's going on with the RRA. I agree with you, like there's more work to do, and I look forward to hearing more about it, but thank you for doing that. I will say one thing that I will respectfully disagree with Mr. Kovacs on. I do believe that there was one sign that was up there that fell into that rude category. It currently doesn't hang there. But it used the C word that refers to a woman's genitalia, which absolutely falls into that sexual rudeness category. But the signs are down, and I appreciate the legwork you did and the discussion that you had afterwards, and just taking it another step forward into the kids are the concern over there.
You understand?
So I just wanted to say thank you for doing that.
The signs are down, but I think the town board is now the subject of signs. Any additional comments? Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I have a motion to close. I have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.